Greetings, Guzzers. We're going to make some cake. And not just any old cake, we're going to make a chocolate cake. And not just any old chocolate cake, we're going to make the chocolate cake. We're going to make a Sacher Torte. This is an Austrian delicacy that is considered by many to be the chocolate cake. Now the actual recipe is like a close guarded secret. And the key to it is the chocolate glaze, and that's apparently very secret. So obviously this is a recipe based on their recipe, but certain details like the chocolate, but we'll come to that, are missing. But the first thing we're going to do is we've got some 55% dark chocolate here, 55% cocoa, and I'm just going to melt that down over this bain-marie saucepan with water in. So remember, don't let the bowl touch water. I've got in there 130 grams, and we're just going to melt that down, okay? And then you're going to need 6 eggs, you're going to need some caster sugar, icing sugar, softened butter, plain flour, vanilla extract, and then to finish you're going to want some more of that dark chocolate, you're going to want some caster sugar, more caster sugar, and some apricot jam. Okay, and that's jam, not jelly for you Americans, right? Anyway, let's get started. Now while that chocolate's melting down, I've got my 6 eggs and I've separated the eggs and the whites and the yolks. And what we're going to do first off is whisk up our egg whites with 100 grams of caster sugar. So I'm just going to chuck that in there. Okay, so where did this Sacher Torte come from? Helps if we turn the power on. Well, we have to go back to 1832. Austria, and a special dinner. But you can't hear me over that properly, so I'm going to get this whisked up. So basically we want it all whisked together until it's sort of stiff, like we're making a meringue. Okay, and when that's melted down, we're just going to take that off the heat and let that cool down slightly. That's my egg whites nicely beaten. Next thing I'm going to take is my unsoftened butter, and I've got, sorry, my softened butter, unsalted, and I've got 150 grams of that, and that's going to go in a different bowl, obviously. And then I've got my icing sugar. I've got 100 grams of that, and we're basically going to whisk these two together. The quantities aren't really worth, I'm just doing this, trying to mix some of the icing sugar in so we don't get clouds of icing sugar everywhere. It's not really big enough to go in your stand mixer, so hence I'm using the hand mixer. So I was saying to you, it's 1832, and the Austrian State Chancellor of Metternich, or Metternich, or I don't know, Metternich, his kitchen has been instructed to concoct a suitable sort of banquet for special guests. And got a spatula somewhere. Wife probably emptied the dishwasher and she'd probably put it in here anyway. I can find it. There it is. And he said to him, I want a special meal, but he says in particular he wants a special dessert, unlike any other. And of course they agreed to it. However, it's that evening and he's giving out these instructions saying, you know, this has got to be done, and the chef's ill. Chef falls ill. So his 16-year-old apprentice, Franz Sacher, has to step forward, and he says, I'll do it, I'll create you something. And old Metternich says, You better not let me down. You better not let me down. And so he goes on to create the Sacher Torte, the chocolate cake. And it is the chocolate cake unlike any other. Right, so this chocolate's just about melted. I'll turn the heat off. Now we will need this saucepan later when we do the glaze, but that's quite a way in the future, because we glaze a cake once it's obviously cooled down, cooked and cooled down. You want to put your oven on at 170. Okay, I think that's all melted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that by, and then just going to stand that over there to let that cool slightly. I've just got butter all over me thing. Useless. So his recipe is the one that is supposedly the recipe that is still sold today exclusively by the hotel where it was created, and obviously certain sites that are allowed to sell it, plus you can get it at duty-free airport. But this Sacher Torte is considered to be the cake. So what I'm going to do is now just whisk this together, okay, and then I'll be adding in some vanilla extract, or if you've got vanilla pods, scraping the seeds from one vanilla pod, and the egg yolk. So that's got me egg yolks beaten in, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Like I said, if you've got a vanilla pod, scrape out the seeds in one vanilla pod. Now, our next thing is we're going to gradually beat in this chocolate mix. Okay, we're now going to add those whisked egg whites on top, and then we're going to add our final ingredient, which is just some plain flour. Okay, we've got 140 grams of plain flour, which I'm just going to sieve in over the top, and then we're going to get that all folded in together. So his cake goes down a storm. Very much impresses the Chancellor. It impresses the members of the court, and essentially everybody's well happy. Franz has made a name for himself, and it goes on to impress the royal court, if you like, and of course, because the court like it, everybody else wants to like it, and so it rapidly becomes the cake to have. And like I say, it is still made today according to this same recipe. Now we're trying to as gently as we can fold that in so we don't lose too much air, but obviously we want to get rid of all the white from the eggs. Now I can't find my cake tin, but if you've got a cake tin, then line the bottom with some baking powder, paper, grease it with butter, then flour it, and then we're going to tip that in there. Now I can't find my cake tin. God, where's it gone? So I'm going to have to do it in two. So I'm just going to, because what you normally do is you would bake it one cake and halve it, but because I can't find my cake tin, I'm going to do it in two halves. They're quite shallow, my cake tins, so I wasn't confident they wouldn't overflow. So they will then go in the oven, like I say, at 170 for initially 10 to 15 minutes. It recommends you crack the top of the door open. After 10 to 15 minutes, close it and then let it cook for about another 50 minutes. And basically, just do your normal test for whether it's cooked, okay? And then bring it out and allow it to cool down completely. Now, in our case, because we're not going to have to halve it, it's not so important. Just thinking which one might need a bit more in. But don't try and cut it while it's still warm. If you've got one and you're going to halve it, make sure it's cold. Well, it's cooled. Otherwise, you'll end up having a mess. So, like I say, it's going to go in the oven, and then we'll bring it out and cool it. So the cake's come out of the oven, and I've now got them cooling. They've been cooling for about half hour now, or possibly 40 minutes. I've had a fault with my oven, and as a result, I'm sort of having to use the grill elements at the top. So mine was starting to catch on the top, so I covered them, but I decided just to trim off the top of them, simply because they were catching a little bit. Now in here I've got about 200 grams of apricot jam, and what I want to do is gently warm it. Now actually, might have perhaps been better to think about doing this in a bain-marie, but I just want to be careful. I basically want to get it loosened up, so a bit more runny, and it is traditionally apricot jam, and what we'll do is spread it on the top of one of the cakes, and then we put the other on top, and then we're going to coat the whole of the outside, obviously not the bottom, with apricot jam, and then we're going to make the chocolate glaze. Now I think I mentioned one of the secrets, just going to turn that down, one of the secrets is this chocolate glaze, and supposedly it's made up of 3 types of chocolate that are exclusive to this recipe, that they're made by these 3 manufacturers, and their specific use is to be used in Sacher Torte. Various people over the years have tried to copy the recipe and release it, but at the end of the day, the original, as always the case is, and now legally they're the only ones who are allowed to say this is an original. They put them in a really nice fancy box, decorate a certain way, the cake inside is wrapped a certain way with certain, I think it's a burgundy paper and various other things, which, so you know you've got the original. And like I say, you know, you can buy it in certain select places, you can buy it in the duty free, but essentially you get it only from the original hotel where all friends designed this cake. So that's softening up now. So I've got me, like I said, some more of that dark chocolate. We've got 150 grams of that. I've got 200 grams of caster sugar, and you also want 125 mils, grams, same thing, of water. Because what we're going to do is we're going to make up sugar syrup with the water and caster sugar, add in that chocolate, and then pour that over the cake to give it the classic, well, as classic as we can make it. Now, I do think my chocolate cakes have come out very pale. Like I said, the recipe I used was from the Hotel Sacher website, and they stress this is an approximation of the original. All the other recipes I found when I Googled it do it a similar way, but the actual colour is a lot paler than when you look at an original slice of this chocolate cake. It is a lot more like a chocolate cake in colour. So whether they add something like cocoa powder or not, I don't know, but certainly that doesn't get mentioned in the original recipe. Right, I think this is starting to get nice and smooth. So like I say, first off, we're just going to put a layer of apricot jam on top. It doesn't matter, like I say, about going out the sides. The original recipe, well, the recipe from the hotel, talks about, at this point, putting the jam on top and then lifting one up, putting the other. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to coat that. I'm then going to put that one on top, and then we're now going to add this layer of jam to the top, and also, like I said, we're going to go round and do the sides as well. So I've just managed to get one of my ends, so I'm going to just wash my hands. So into this saucepan I've put 125 mils of water, and then we're going to add 200 grams of sugar, caster sugar, and we're now going to bring that up to a boil and let it boil for about 5 minutes. Now, I said to you earlier about, you're going to want that bain-marie to melt down that next lot of chocolate. Perhaps I should read the recipes a little bit better next time, because essentially you don't need to melt it down. You can just chop it up and put it in here to melt it down. But one of the key things to this glaze is it nice to be nice and glossy, and if you get it too hot, when it sets it will be quite dull. And so I thought, well, actually probably melting that down a little bit to begin with means I won't need to heat it for so long in here. So we're just going to, like I say, bring this up to the boil, and then we're going to boil it for 5 minutes, like I say, to make sugar syrup. And then I think I've already said you want 150 grams of that chocolate ready to add into it. Now, what we're then going to do is pour it over the chocolate, over the cake, but we're going to test it first to make sure it is at the right consistency. We need to let it cool a bit. We don't want to put it on there when it's too hot. And then we're going to spread it, and we want a nice coating over the entire cake when it comes out looking like a bloody mess. So that's my sugar syrup boiled and allowed to cool slightly. And now what we're going to do is add in that chocolate. Whoops, he says splashing it down the cupboard. And we're going to then mix this in until it's all, do that before I lean on that and then get it all up sort of me. All I'm doing there is spreading it around even further. And we want to get that mixed in till it's all melted and combined. So there's a few lumps at the moment. And then the test is to dip in, apparently, a wooden spoon and bring it out, and if it stays with a layer of about 4mm of chocolate on it, then that is at the right stage to pour it over your cake. It's then poured over and quickly spread over using a palette knife until obviously the whole cake is covered, and then we allow it, well, basically to set, which could take a few hours. Okay. I was going to do it straight on a cake board, but then I thought it's going to look a mess with the chocolate that might run off down the sides. So I'm doing it on here, and once it's then set, I'll either transfer it to a cake board or a plate. I just have to see how it goes. Be careful, I'm scraping the sugar off. So it's still quite warm at the moment. So I'm going to let it cool and thicken a little bit, and then we'll do our wooden spoon test. So let's give this a go. I'm going to pour it over the back of a wooden spoon. It's perhaps still a little bit runny, so I wouldn't call that 4mm. I'll probably say it's close. So we'll let that just cool and thicken a little bit more, I think. And the eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed my spatula has changed, not a lot. The other one, I put a bit of pressure on it, it snapped. Not very impressed. Can't remember where I bought them from. It's starting to thicken slightly, but we'll give it a little bit longer yet. Yeah, I've just done the wooden spoon test, and I think we're now sort of there. So just pouring this glaze over. I obviously want it to run down the sides because I want to try and cover the sides. I can use a palette knife, but at the moment I'm hoping that just by gravity, if you like, and making sure I spread it all over. Like I said at the beginning, I think this is probably not one of the best times of the year to be making it, certainly not in the UK. We're in the middle of one of our second heat, well, say in the middle, we're coming to the end of one of our heat waves we've had. And although it has cooled down today, it is 25 at the moment, probably hotter in here. It's already sort of skinning, as it were. It was doing that earlier in the pan when I was letting it cool. And what I'm trying to do is try not to make too much of a mess, but I want to make sure I've got a little patch down here where I can still see the cake. There's a little patch on there, a little patch just down there. And you might notice there's quite a big patch just there. So just try and get that. Always the last bit, and it wants to be a little bugger. But there you go. I think that's now the whole cake covered. So we now let that set for a couple of hours. When that gets a little bit better, I might try and transfer that. And then once it's all nice and set, we'll have to taste it. Now traditionally, this is served with unsweetened whipped cream. We're not going to do that. We don't normally have cream in the house. Wife won't eat it. But anyway, I just want to try it as it is. So once we get to that point, we'll have a last little taste. So here it is, the final Sacher Torte. Okay, the glaze is sort of semi-set. It's not like rock hard chocolate, if you like. It's a little bit soft. It's had a couple of hours to set, but I think it's time to taste it, isn't it? So, better get slicing.